Hello and welcome to the Tommy Rock Show. This episode is brought to you by nobody. I don't have any sponsors yet. This is my first episode. My first conversation is with Adam Garone. I hope you'll enjoy it. Well, today I have the delightful pleasure to chat with Adam Garone. Adam Garone is one of the most successful social entrepreneurs of recent times. Adam co-founded and led the Movember Foundations from its humble beginnings in 2003 in Melbourne, Australia, to become a global phenomenon that changed literally and figuratively the face of men's health. From nothing to a global charity, a global movement, a cult brand that has raised over $1 billion, funding 1,200 men's health programs in 21 countries, Adam built Movember into one of the most innovative and impactful social enterprises created this millennium. Using the mustache as the driving symbol of the movement, Movember focuses on the three key areas of prostate cancer, testicular cancer, and mental health and suicide prevention. Life after Movember saw Adam consulting with organizations and entrepreneurs dedicated to using business and culture for good. I'm actually one of those lucky entrepreneurs mentored by Adam. In February 2019, 16 years after starting Movember and 2 years ago now, Adam accepted the role of CEO of Starlight Children Foundation, where he is leading the organization through a transition to build the brand and grow revenue in order to deliver more happiness to seriously ill children. In this podcast, we will dig into the early days of Movember, get to know Adam a bit deeper, and share skills and tools that you as a listener can take with you on how to create something meaningful of your work and of your life. Adam, thank you so much for doing what you do, and thank you so much for sharing your story here today.
Thank you, Tommy. I understand this is the first episode, so I'm honored to be the first guest.
Yes, it's true. You're the first guest of the Tommy Rock Show. What I'm trying to do here is to talk to people like you who live a meaningful life, artists, founders, musicians, researchers, politicians, athletes, businesswomen. I want to share their story, their perspective, so the listeners can learn something, maybe grab some tools to live their own meaningful life. And I'm excited and I'm a little bit nervous. And my first question for you then would be, Adam, what would your advice be to someone starting something new like me?
I think the entrepreneurial journey is a tough one, and just to start something, it requires a deep dedication to whatever that is. And with that deep motivation, you'll be able to persist through not making any money for the first part, through all the myriad of hurdles and barriers that you need to navigate to make your enterprise successful. So if you're on the fence about something, an idea or a concept, that's probably a really good indicator that maybe there's something not quite there. But if you are all in about a particular idea, so much of a successful organization is about grit and determination, because there's going to be hundreds and thousands of reasons why you should stop pursuing a particular, building an organization or whatever it is. So you have to have that deep motivation and that crystal clear vision of whatever it is, and what it will become, and hold on to that vision, knowing that how you get there and how you think you'll get there will no doubt change, because different things will get thrown at you along the way. So it's that deep passion about whatever it is that you're working on, and that's the starting premise.
That's such a good start. Thank you. And yes, I can see through your story the determination, the grit, the passion. I want to get into the beginnings of Movember. I want to start by saying, I think one of the reasons why I am so inspired and love this what you have created, on top of the billions of dollars raised for charity, and the impact itself is the community you build, the millions of Mo Bros and Mo Sisters. And so before we get into the beginning of how it started and why it started, I'd love for you to share the story of one particular Mo Bro. If you could tell the story of the taxi driver in Toronto in 2010.
Yeah, that was an amazing story. It was 2012, I believe, and it was toward the end of November. And that year, that was the year that, Movember truly went viral. In the space of 6 weeks, the campaign raised, I think it was $145 million. And, the awareness engagement, there was 1.3 million people signed up fundraising across the world. And Movember was everywhere, and in particular Canada. It was on the faces of pretty much every hockey player and fan. And we were sort of celebrating the end of Movember, and we were out for dinner, and then we're going to another bar, and we jumped into a taxi. This is pre-Uber, and got in the taxi, and the taxi driver had this amazing mustache, and I commented on his mustache, and he says, "Oh, it's for Movember." And I said, "Oh, I'm growing one for Movember as well." Mine was nowhere near as impressive as his was, but I said, "Oh, well, what's your motivation for growing a mustache?" And I didn't allude to me being the CEO at the time or starting the organization with my brother and a couple of mates, because I wanted it just to be a genuine and real conversation. And he literally pulled over the taxi, and he said, "Well," he goes, "I know Movember is for men's health, but I'm growing my mustache as a tribute to my mother." I recall he was from Sri Lanka, and he said that he and his family weren't able to fund the treatment for his mother, and sadly she had recently passed from breast cancer. So he said that his mustache and him growing as part of Movember was a tribute to his mum, and that he would do that every year to remember her. And it was just such a beautiful moment to hear someone's that this became their outlet and way to remember and honor their mum. And we all shared our reasons for doing it. And I didn't tell him that, I was the founder or CEO of Movember, because it just felt a little bit disingenuous at the time. And we just had a really amazing discussion for probably 15 minutes in the taxi. And it was just one of the most touching moments in my whole time at Movember, just to hear his deep passion for Movember and growing it, and then his motivation.
Thank you for sharing that. Before millions of people were growing mustaches around the world, there weren't many people growing mustaches. Can we go back to 2003? Can you tell me the story of the mustache comeback? How did it get started? Why did it get started?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the legend of the story is my brother and his very good friend Luke, and they were having beers on a Sunday afternoon, and my brother's birthday is at the end of November 27. And they were reflecting on fashion and trends and how the mustache had gone out of favor at the time, and this was 2003. But our dads and sport heroes and movie stars back in the day had them. And so they decided to bring back the mustache, to have a mustache themed party as part of my brother's birthday celebration, rename the month November to Movember. And we had two parties, one at the start to show that you're clean shaven, and we all took Polaroid pictures of our clean shaven face and drew a mustache on them. So it was like there was a competition to see who grew a mo, who closely matched what they drew on the 1st of November as on the at the end of the month. And so it had really nothing to do with anything other than to see if we could grow mustaches and to celebrate my brother's birthday. it was this amazing journey of changing your appearance, and the conversations that were prompted off the back of that as to why you were doing it. And it became this, in my mind, this perfect word of mouth campaign where you could change your appearance over the course of a month, create conversations, and that was really the motivation in the following year to sit down with Trav and Luke and one other founder and say, hey, why don't we turn this into a campaign whereby we grow mustaches, we raise awareness for a cause, and raise some money along the way. And that first year in 2003, there were 30 people that did Movember. And then the next year we had 450 people do Movember. And, up to 2012, which was the peak year, we had 1.3 million people, raising $145 million. And I often think about that because in every entrepreneurial journey, and we've talked about this, if you can't get 30 people engaged and buying into your enterprise and buying your product or service or engaging in a charitable endeavor, you're never going to get to 300, and you're never going to get to 3,000 or 300,000 or 3 million customers, whatever it is. So that first 30, and then the following year was 450. They're oftentimes the hardest customers to get, but they often become the most inspired, and go on and create that virality that we had. So, and even at Starlight now, we're creating a campaign which is all about engaging the streaming community, those that play games, and musicians that stream, and chefs that stream, and it's working. And first we had 10 streamers, and then we had 30 streamers, and we started a campaign on March 10, which is Mario Day, because one of our partners is Nintendo. And, we've got 400 now streamers that have raised, $110,000 just in a few days. So it just becomes about, finding that first 30 and then accelerating that to the next 300, and then 3,000, and then 30,000. And momentum builds momentum. It's, it's that flywheel effect.
Yeah, starting small before trying to say, I want to build something for everybody. Is the number 30 a particular number, or is just the idea of something small?
30 was the number that first did Movember, and it's a number I've just held on to. It could be 20, it could be 50, but I've found 30 and 300 to be sort of key milestones that I look for in growing, an organization or a campaign, because and they're the hardest. They're the hardest to get, and then beyond that, it's, you can set different milestones, but 30, 300, 3,000 have been sort of key benchmarks, and I guess it's easy to remember.
Mm-hmm. And do you think there's a specific time frame to hone that small before trying to scale, before trying to go big? I know there's also the story of how before going to the United States, you started with a smaller country to start again with that idea of, let's figure it out with a smaller group. Let's really engage these people before trying to engage the world.
Yeah. I often think about the beat of an organization. So, and that varies from organization to organization. Movember is fairly unique in that it had an annual beat, in that we had one campaign for 1 month of the year. And obviously there was a lot of work that went into that. There was the pre-promotion in October, and then a little bit of wrap up in December. So that had an annual beat, and really we could only ever get a handle truly on the growth of the organization once a year. At Starlight, we're running campaigns every quarter. So every quarter we get a true indication around the growth of the organization. And in fact, we've got some persistent campaigns that run year round. So we've got metrics on that every month. So timing for Movember is a little bit different because it was, we only got to do the campaign once a year. But in all my endeavors, again, I guess coming back to the number three, it's always seemed to take 3 to 4 years for something to really bed down and for it to fly. And every entrepreneur, including myself, wants to accelerate that. You want success quicker, and you do everything you can to make that a reality. But again, stuff just takes time. It takes time to build a brand. It takes time to build a community. When you're starting out, you don't get everything right. Well, not even starting out. In established organizations, you don't get stuff that you're doing for the first time right, ever. And if you're not, you're probably not pushing the boundaries enough on that. But I've found, 3, 4 to 5 years is what it takes for something to bed down. And that, I saw that in Movember when we launched in each country. It took 3 to 4 years for it to really kick. We opened a small barbershop here in LA, and that took 3 years to really build a true customer base of regular customers coming in, and then you get the infrequent customers on top of that. So, and even at Starlight, I came in. This is an established organization, and really reinvented the brand and our digital presence and created a number of campaigns. And I've been there 2 years now, and I'm seeing traction and success in the new stuff we've built, but it's still probably another year off before you'll see that true momentum and return.
I'm curious to hear about how that transition worked for you. When did you realize like that there was some traction, that this was maybe something worth quitting your job and going full into? Because at first it was just, like you say, you were having fun with your buddies and growing a mustache and raising some money for charity. When were you like, let me do this really full time? And then why, and how did that all feel to you? I'm curious to really feel that experience.
Yeah, it was, this was meant to be a passion project for us and something that we could do in our spare time and contribute to humanity in some way. So in 2004, which was our first real fundraising year, we had 450 people sign up and raised $54,000, and we donated all that to the Prostate Cancer Foundation. The next year, it really took a significant step up. I recall we had 10 or 11,000 people signed up as fundraisers, and we ended up raising $1.2 million. So from $54,000 to $1.2 million. And again, this was all in our spare time and just cobbled together. And again, we donated all that money to the Prostate Cancer Foundation. But with that came a lot of awareness and a lot of skepticism around who we were, what we were doing. We weren't a registered charity at that point. We were working through the Prostate Cancer Foundation. There were like, who's on your board of directors? How much am I getting paid? And I wasn't getting paid anything at the time, but that wasn't the perception. And who are you guys? How, what's going on? And I think with any success like we've had, there's going to be a bunch of people that love what you do. There's going to be a bunch of people that are somewhat jealous about creating this idea, and there's going to be some detractors. And so it became this point where it was like, okay, we need to, be far more professional as an organization, create an independent board of directors, have auditors, have lawyers. And with that comes a whole, you add overhead to the organization, which ultimately is taken away from the donations. So it became this pivotal point where we discussed, okay, this is caught us a little by surprise in terms of the growth. We don't have the time to do this in our spare time anymore. So we contemplated shutting down Movember after the 2005 campaign. Or if we were going to continue with it, we had to take some of the money that we've raised and invest in, making the organization as professional as possible. And obviously we chose the latter. And then I and one of the other co-founders, Luke, quit our corporate jobs and started working for Movember, again for no money. And we did some consulting work on the side, and we were sort of working 7 days a week, 18 hours a day. And my brother, Trav, was, through his creative agency doing the same. So that became the point at which we knew there was something here, and the point at which we knew to take the next step in the evolution of Movember. We needed to, figure a way to fund the organization, and luckily we got a couple of corporate sponsors that jumped on board and gave us enough money to at least fund part of the operation.
Yeah, because even you were speaking about kind of the doubts and the people that were skeptical, even the the Prostate Cancer Foundation at first that you were raising for wasn't necessarily so excited about Movember, right?
No, they didn't want to partner with us formally in 2004 because they just thought the idea was ridiculous and would never work. And it is on it when you step back from it, it is a ridiculous idea, but it worked, and we knew it would work. We all, and this is what I talk about, having that crystal clear vision. And not everyone's going to share your vision, particularly when you're trying to create an enterprise around getting men to grow mustaches. And that skepticism repeated itself over and over and over again. And it comes back to that true sort of belief in what you're doing, because you're going to get people that think your idea is silly, stupid, and totally discount you and write you off. So yeah, the Prostate Cancer Foundation, didn't want to formally partner with us in that first year. But the parting comment was, hey, if you happen to raise any money, you can write us a check. And we did. We wrote them a check for $54,000, which is all the money we raised in 2004. That then led to a partnership with them, and the next campaign raised $1.2 million for the organization, which was an organization that was raising, I think, $3 or $4 million a year with a full-time staff. And so this was unbelievable to that organization.
Is that, you mentioned you knew this was a success, that crystal clear vision. You knew what you were doing and where you were going. It was just a matter of time to get there. Why do you think it worked so well? What do you think was so clear? How did you know that?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I always look for close comparisons, and for me, changing your appearance over the course of the month was this significant commitment. And so there was the commitment aspect, which was big. And in my mind, running a marathon for charity is a big commitment. So you train, you run the marathon on the day, and off the back of that commitment, you get your friends and family to donate to whatever cause you're supporting. There was also a charity that had been around a while called the World's Greatest Shave. There's some Baldricks here in the US. There's a number of similar charities where the challenge is you shave your hair. And typically, it's for, in Australia, the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. Here, St. Baldrick's is for childhood cancer. So in my mind, the mechanism was the same. You're changing your appearance fundamentally. It's sort of the reverse. But they were raising, $15 million a year in Australia at the time. So in my mind, okay, that all the elements of running a marathon for charity or shaving your head for charity are the same. We're just going to reconfigure that. And then we're going to create this amazing brand that is targeting young men. And no one in the charitable sector at the time had targeted that segment, and create a brand that we wanted to be part of, and not use fear-based marketing like 1 in 6 men will get prostate cancer or whatever, therefore you should do this. Create this truly aspirational, like, lifestyle brand. So, and again, coming, and there's an element of Movember, which is there's an element of a lightning in a bottle to it. There's absolutely that. There's an element of luck, and you need all that. But then it's about exceptional execution over time. And Movember wouldn't have grown, wouldn't have expanded internationally without exceptional execution and leadership and management, not just from me, but from the team. So, with Starlight, I looked at it and go, all right, 2 of our programs provide gaming in virtual reality and with our Nintendo Switches to kids in hospital. Okay, I've seen other charities, including Movember, raise money from the gaming community online, and they aren't in gaming. We can tap into the gaming community like these other charities that are having success, but our authenticity in the space and the thing that differentiates us is we get to place gaming stations and we get to allow kids in hospital faced with whatever it is they're going through to game and play. That's a beautiful through line. So let's go there. And I've worked, and it's taken time. So I always look for, who are the close comparisons, who are the competitors, near competitors. And I think whenever anyone says, well, I've got this idea, and I say, well, who are your competitors? And it's like, well, there is none. It's like, to me, that's a bit of a red flag, because it either means you don't understand your industry enough, or there's no competitors in this space because potentially there's no market for this. There's always competitors. Identical competitors, near competitors. And I think looking for those and really understanding their business, how they work, their strengths, and then how whatever it is you're creating can be different, is the key part. Because with Movember, the fundraising mechanism behind it all, no different to what was happening with other event-based charities. We certainly wrapped an amazing brand around it. We created our own technology that, we were literally, the first charity to take the whole registration process, donations, everything online, back in 2004. Now it's obviously commonplace, but it was all done by mail at the time. So yeah, I think having a real good understanding of who your close competitors are, near competitors, and what makes you different is really important.
I want to bring it back to you particularly. You came to from Australia to Los Angeles around 20 years ago, and you're living at this time what some would call the American dream, right? You have this, you create this global phenomenon. You raise billions for charity. You're saving thousands of lives. You live in sunny Los Angeles. You have a beautiful house, healthy children, a gorgeous Californian wife. You're a good looking fellow. I mean, it's this picture that some could see as I'll call it the American dream for because I don't have a better word about it. My question is, what is true about pursuing this kind of image, this image that I just painted, and what was exciting to you maybe 20 years ago coming here, and what have you learned after 20 years ago, and what is keeping you here after this time as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I actually came across in 2007 to launch Movember in North America and take it global. Was the whole reason I immigrated across, which in itself, and you've done it, is a significant challenge to immigrate from one country to another. It's just a whole bunch of red tape and an extra layer of admin that you need to go through. Yeah, I've chosen a life of working, a life dedicated to service. In the military for 9 years, the Australian military, then for Movember, and now for Starlight. So, with that, there's no equity. There's you earn a good salary, but it's there's no organizational, or there's no personal upside from the organization's success, and that's the reality of the not-for-profit world. And I think the American dream is, it's one of capitalism and making as much money for yourself and generational wealth and all that sort of stuff. And don't get me wrong, I have a blessed life here, and but I think a lot about what makes you happy and what makes me happy, and you know a life of service and serving others makes me very happy, and that that's my kids, and with Jess, my wife, and our family, and then beyond that to these causes, and just having our kids grow up understanding the importance of service and how you can do that in various ways, as a volunteer, as a fundraiser, as a donor, as a career. That to me is the most important sort of attribute I want to instill in our kids, that along with humility. But it is a good life. I mean, it's been a tough year. It's been a tough year everywhere. But I think for the first time ever last year, we thought about potentially going back to Australia. I mean, the US was just in my view, complete turmoil. And you ultimately move countries because there's better opportunities in those countries that you're moving to. Ultimately, that could be personal, it could be professional, but you move to a country because you think there's better opportunities there. And for the first time since 2007, I saw what was happening in Australia versus here, and I was like, okay, life is better in Australia than it is here. And you start to think about potentially going back. We didn't do that. We've got 2 kids, and going to a local school, and love our friends and family here. But the pandemic and everything does cause you to stop, reflect, and think about, in part because you've got so much time to do that, what's important and where do you want to be, like geographically for us as well.
You mentioned service, and you mentioned, you think a lot about what makes you happy, and service is a big part of your life. Like you said, when you were a kid, you wanted to serve your country. You served in the military. You served Men's Health through Movember. Now you're serving children. I'm curious to understand what service means to you and how it relates to happiness.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about the difference between success and significance. I think a lot of us in our first half of our adult life think are focused on success, and that could be academics at school, college. Then you get into the workforce, and it's success with the amount of money you get paid, titles, responsibility, and that materializes into things that show you're successful, and cars, watches, clothes, whatever it is that you're into. And then I think when people get to this point at different stages of their life, but you start to think about, okay, that's great, but there has to be more to this, because success brings, in my mind, fleeting moments of happiness. But when you focus on significance, and significance to me is about serving and serving other people less fortunate than you, and when you do that, you realize how fulfilling that makes you, and that brings like a deeper sense of joy and fulfillment and purpose in your life. And that could be contributing to your local school, your street, your core family. When you're serving other people beyond yourself, that personally for me is that brings me the greatest sense of fulfillment. And as you get on in age, I think I think about my legacy, and I want it to be more than just, he's the dude that one of the dudes that started Movember, and the mustache guy. I want it to be much more than that, and that doesn't need to be that broad. I want my kids just to know me more, because they see all this mustache stuff around the house, and what is all that? They pick up on it. So that's what I think about, is being significant and your legacy, and how is it you can nudge this world in a slightly better direction, which I think is much more meaningful than a career that just, brings in way more money, but potentially, I mean, that just transpires into stuff that you, for the most part, don't really need.
Thank you for sharing that. For someone who's maybe getting started and hearing this and feeling like, yes, I want to find purpose. Also, maybe asking themselves these questions: where can they start? Where would you recommend they start? What can they do to? What should they pursue? What should they maybe think about? What should they be curious about?
Yeah, my sort of social entrepreneurial journey started differently to almost most. It started with a concept, a campaign, and way to raise awareness and money, and then that led to, well, what do we focus that on, which was men's health. Um, that is a really odd and fairly unique way to start a social entrepreneurial journey, but it's not completely unusual. So I would recommend more generally for people that want to focus on a particular cause is to think deeply about what really matters to them and what is an authentic connection to that particular cause, and why. And sometimes, unfortunately, people are directly impacted by a particular issue themselves or within their family, and they become passionate about that. I think that start with what is it, what societal issue, societal injustice you want to focus on, understand that deeply, make sure you have a personal connection with that, even if you have to get involved with that. And then before starting your own enterprise around that, I would look for what organizations are already working in the space and do really good due diligence around that, and then get connected with that organization to maybe volunteer or get involved. And that will create a deeper connection to the cause. And then if you want to start something new around that, then that would be the springboard point that I'd go off. But in any sort of particularly charitable organization or social enterprise, there's the societal issue, and then a theory of change around how you're going to impact that societal issue. And once you've bedded that down, it's like, all right, how are we going to fund this? Are we going to get people to grow mustaches? Are we going to engage the streaming community to game and have fun? Are we going to go after high net worth individuals? There needs to be a fundraising machine there. And then the third part is the governance part of the organization, the finance, legal, independent boards, all that sort of stuff. They're the three elements that need to be right, particularly with starting an enterprise with the social purpose at its core.
I want to get into back to you about so I mentioned in the beginning some of your achievements, and you mentioned how success is deeper than that, and I've how I've as I met you, I realized and get to know the wonderful man that you are, and how you are authentic and humble and curious and open and deeply compassionate. Um, and I know that this is something that you mentioned as something that's important, particularly to men's health. I mean, women's health as well, to be open, to be vulnerable. So I'd be curious to know what's in between the lines of a bio we can read about you, and if you can share some of the difficult moments around on your journey, your doubts, your fears along the way, and then maybe sharing as well why you think it's so important to be vulnerable, and the importance of that conversation.
Yeah, it's vulnerability is it's hard, because there is this stoicism, and sort of societal expectations, particularly around men and vulnerability, and it's a core part of the conversations that we created with Movember that we were trying to break down and have men open up about what's really going on in their life. And again, any entrepreneur, anyone creating an organization or creating a campaign or a new initiative within an organization, you are absolutely going to have doubts. And sharing those doubts is tough, but really important. I mean, even at Starlight, an established organization, we've created a whole bunch of new initiatives, and I was talking with a team the other day, and this analogy around, okay, if you plant seeds and they're the right seeds, the soil's good, you water them and they're in sun, they're going to grow. But for a period of time, seemingly nothing on the surface is going to happen. But you don't dig the soil up and dig the seeds up to check if they're growing. You've got to believe in the process and have the patience to see that through. But with that comes vulnerability and uncertainty, because you can't really see anything happening. And with some of the initiatives that we created at Starlight, that's exactly what was happening. We created these new fundraising channels, and it's a lot of work in the background. And then I'm managing the board of directors' expectations around, well, how quickly is this going to translate into new revenue? It's like, you've just got to have patience in the process and trust in the process. But when you can't see much happening, you've got external pressures and you're in the middle, you start to question, okay, is this the right thing? Should I be digging up the soil to check that the seeds are sprouting? Of course, if you do that, you're going to ruin the whole thing. And so oftentimes you're managing different expectations. And there's been many moments, even more recently at Starlight, where I've had doubts around, okay, is this right? And then you just go back. It's like, all right, we're doing everything right as far as I understand it. The ingredients, what we're doing is the same stuff we did at Movember, and that was a phenomenal success. It will come. But even in the Movember days, we had phenomenal success, but there were times and moments where that absolutely wasn't the case. And we saw really great growth in Australia. And we had a lot of interest from New Zealand. So we launched the campaign in 2006 in New Zealand. I went across and launched there. In the first year, it raised $1 million, and that's from a population of 3.5 million. So it was a phenomenal success year one. In 2007, we decided to launch the campaign in the US and in Canada and the UK and in Spain. And we had all the same levels of interest, but at a totally different scale. I mean, the US population, I think, is 310 million versus 3.1 million in New Zealand at the time. So you had 100-fold factor. And so, packed up everything, moved across to the US, and it was literally couch surfing for the first year, trying to be the global CEO and launch the campaign specifically in the US and in Canada. And we set a target. We thought, all right, if we raised $1 million the first year in New Zealand, surely we could raise $2 million in the US and $2 million in Canada and $2 million in the UK. And so I'd uprooted everything and moved across here. And in its first year, Movember raised, I think it was $500,000 or $600,000. So well short of what we thought were exceptionally conservative targets. For the US, it was roughly the same in Canada. So it failed. And I was over here by myself, and you're going, okay, and the campaign was really successful again in Australia and New Zealand. It's like, okay, I've made a really bad decision here, personally and professionally. But then it's like, okay, what you then come to realize is the US is not one country from a market point of view. It's so fragmented. California, the three cities couldn't be different, from San Diego to LA to San Francisco. So when you start to understand the US market and the complexities of it, you just come back and it's like, this was a stupid expectation to come into this country and expect to do that year one. So it was years actually of complete uncertainty doubt. But again, coming back to that 3 to 4 year rule, it was like year 3, you definitely saw the traction. But in that first year, there were, okay, we've got a couple of, we had Kelly Slater do it. We had Quicksilver on board as a corporate partner. Okay, there's some elements here that we had at the very first part of Movember in Australia. I think it's just going to take longer here. But yeah, I mean, it's tough because you're leading an organization, you know, enthusiasm and, you know, as a leader, you know, you want to project this level of confidence that we're going to win, we're going to succeed. But at the same time, you've got all these personal doubts around if it will. So it's a real balance between, you know, projecting confidence as a leader and then, you know, also not hiding your vulnerabilities. And I think it's, you know, and I've certainly evolved as a leader over time. And I think, you know, you can be vulnerable. You can say, listen, I think as far as I know, this is the right plan. Here's, you know, what we need to look for this to be successful. Because, you know, the other thing you need to quickly do is recognize where something isn't working, and not pursue something so far and invest in something so much that, you know, that it you know, it topples over a business or, you know, fails as a startup. I think that's another really good and tough skill, is to go, well, I don't think this is the right decision, the right thing, even though you know, when you set out, you did.
So that patience, and it seems like by being vulnerable and real, you're able to see what are the parts that maybe don't work and then fix them. Would that be something that you would, I mean, for someone who's, you know, you're a CEO, like you say, you have this pressure to motivate, to be positive. What would you say to someone who's maybe listening and struggling to be vulnerable, and they think that they should be strong and that they should, you know, for any reason, what are maybe the benefits of being vulnerable? Why should people be vulnerable?
Yeah, I think this is the value of mentorship, and, you know, having a confidant that, you know, isn't necessarily directly or indirectly involved in the organization is so critically important. We talked about this. I didn't have a mentor as such for many years, and I wished that I did, because it'd be just someone outside the organization going, "Hey, man, I just need to download on this." So I was like, I thought this was going to be this way, and it hasn't transpired. And to have someone or a group of people that you can just go, you know, download and have a completely transparent conversation with is really, really healthy, both personally and professionally. And I encourage everyone to do that and think about, you know, who is it in your network that you could potentially have as a mentor, and also at a personal level, like who is it that you can share, you know, what's going on, the ups, the downs, and for that to be a, you know, reciprocal thing. I think that's, I wish I had, you know, a mentor from the get-go. I really do.
What did you learn, on top of the different things that you shared today? What else did you learn in this growth, as a leader, but also as an individual, on your journey?
You know, you know, think about a lot about leadership. You know, leadership in the military is quite different. It's very structured, hierarchical, and there's good reason for that. Really good reason for that. You know, now and you can see management leadership styles. I've even noticed it changed over the last few years. It's fundamentally changed, and it's a two-way conversation now. It's, you know, staff. We engage in culture surveys and we get feedback, and we're constantly listening, and staff have an opportunity to rate managers and myself. And when I grew up in the workforce, there was, you know, there was no two-way conversation around that. And I think that's healthy. And, you know, you take that feedback on, and, you know, you're never going to please everyone, and with your product, with your service, with your style of leadership. And I think that's also important to remember as you navigate all this, feedback around, how you communicate and lead the organization. But, I think and I've always been, tried to be a very, very open person and very transparent around decision making and plans and strategies, and being as inclusive as possible in how we develop those, from sort of including all staff. But at the end of the day, leadership is about making decisions, and it's about creating a vision and then motivating people around that. And when you make decisions, particularly the tougher ones, not everyone's going to agree with that, but it's I think particularly starting a business, it's all about making a series of right decisions. You're not going to get everyone right, but you need to be making 98 out of 100 right decisions along the way. And that could be with who's your equity partners, who's your first employees, what product features are we going to build and focus on, who are we going to target this to, how are we going to price it, all those. It's a series of decisions you make as an entrepreneur. And leadership entrepreneur is really interchangeable in my view. I think you really need to be a good leader to be a successful entrepreneur, because ultimately it's about creating a vision of this business, and then getting people and resources around you to believe and sharing that mission and drive it forward. I'm not sure whether I answered your question properly.
No, it did. Yeah, it's great. How do you make the right decision?
A lot of listening, and it's like, I love that saying. You got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You do double the listening and half the talking. But yeah, it's a lot of listening. It's where you can, looking at data and looking at insights, and that's been the other fundamental change over the last really decade. But when you're starting something, you don't have a lot of data and insights because you don't have a lot of customers. So where you can base your decisions on the data and insights, and you can make data look however you want, like you really can, but it's being as objective in that analysis as possible. It's including people in that analysis. It's for me, it's a big part of it is surrounding yourself with the right people. And I often think about healthy tensions within an organization. Healthy tensions, I think, are good because there should be a healthy tension between the sales crew and what they're out there selling versus what the engineering team and the functionality of the product is doing today. Because salespeople will always sell beyond what we've got today, but that can drive innovation and product development. But also there needs to be a tension back to go, hey, that's not feasible. And so that's a healthy tension. There's often a healthy tension between the creative folk and what they want to do creatively from a marketing point of view and what core messages we actually need to get across and the call to action. So I think having those healthy tensions and having the right people around you, listening to them, looking at the data. But in the very early days, and sometimes you just need to go with your gut feel, because sometimes there's a void of data. I didn't know whether streaming for Starlight was going to work. We had no data. We'd never tried it before. There are other organizations that were doing it and successful. All right, I think we can do this. And then it becomes a gut feel and a decision that we're going to do it. So I think, decision making is a key part of leadership. And as I said, you're not going to get every decision right. I think the worst decision you can make as a leader is not making a decision and flip-flopping too often on a decision. You got to be decisive. You also need to be adaptable as things transpire, because it's like you will try something, you'll learn, you need to be able to pivot. But yeah.
I have two more questions.
Okay.
What do you do today that brings meaning to you, and why do you do it?
Sorry, could you ask that again?
What do you do today that brings meaning to you, and why do you do it?
Um, yeah. I mean, every day, you know, I'm up with the kids. I make them breakfast. I spend time with them before they go off to school. You know, it's the young kids. So one of the most challenging part of my day is getting their socks on and shoes on and you know at the door. You know, of course, that's with the support of Jess, but you know, it's just a really nice level set around, you know, getting, you know, spending some time with them in the morning and just, you know, remembering that, you know, a lot of what I do personally is, you know, for them and to make sure that they have the best and brightest opportunities, you know, they can. So I think just that time in the morning with them, and I try to get up before them. So that means getting up about 5:30 a.m. just to have a bit of time for myself, have coffee, just have a, you know, I walk around in our garden, just being outside, and no matter how cold it is, just being outside for a little bit as well is you know, just grounding with the earth and starting the day out a little bit slow before they get up and you know, then you get into work.
My last question. What are your dreams for tomorrow? What are you excited about? What are you afraid of?
Yeah. You know, I am really looking forward to the end of the pandemic, the end of you know, the isolation, and for life to return to some sort of normality. You know, that's been tough. You know, my parents live in Australia. My dad has been critically ill, not because of COVID through this time. So not being able to travel to Australia is just a surreal, bizarre thought. Um, so I look forward to, you know, being able to see, you know, my mum and dad, particularly my dad, again. You know, I think about whether there were periods of time where I thought I'd never get to see him again because of his health and because I couldn't go there. So I look forward to the other side of that. I think there's a lot of good that will come from this pandemic and lockdown. And what was it? What am I scared of? That
Excited, afraid. Um,
um,
take whatever it feels, right?
yeah. No, I think I am really excited to be able to travel back to Australia to see my parents, for the kids to see them again. You know, I'm scared about having to battle LA traffic again to get in and out of an office, and I think, you know, that's one thing that'll, I think, fundamentally change. Certainly at Starlight, you know, we've been tracking productivity. Productivity hasn't dropped. In fact, it's increased in some ways. I think creativity has been hit, but I think we can have creativity with, you know, moments together, like half days or full day sessions, versus sitting next to each other on desks in the same room. I think it's been the perfect experiment around how certain workforces can be more productive, um, and have infinitely more flexibility, by being able to work from home, spend more time with the kids, mashed in with some face-to-face time. So yeah, I'm not looking forward to battling LA traffic, that's for sure.
Thank you. That's perfect. Before we hang up, is there any last word, something that you want to share?
Oh, I think, you know, for everyone to think about what is significant to them and the difference between significance and success. And I think, you know, for all of us, and I'm sure because of who you are and the people in your sphere, the people listening to this will be, very much about how can we make this world a little bit better, and that could be in your house, your street, your community, at whatever level. So I think that is the most important thing. It's like, how can we all, make this world a happier, healthier, safer place?
Amen to that. Thank you, Adam. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for sharing your story. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. I really enjoyed the chat.
Okay, before you go, as I was wrapping things up and listening to the interview, there was this question that popped in my head, a burning question that I didn't ask Adam, and I really wanted to hear his answer, and I think you might want to hear it too. So I emailed Adam, and he jumped back on the podcast for this final question. You mentioned that you don't own equity in Movember, and therefore, by not owning equity in Movember, you don't own Movember and you can't sell Movember. And so you made this really successful thing that you can't really profit from. A similar entrepreneur creating a for-profit with a similar success as you would make a lot of money through this endeavor and this journey. And you even have to justify your own salary as the CEO of the foundation, because this is public information and people like to talk about overheads of foundations and nonprofits. And so I'm curious to know, how does that feel? If you think it should be different, anything, and if you would start Movember today, if you would do anything differently.
Yeah, sure. I think, by definition, a not-for-profit is, it's not about the owners of the organization. So when we started and I was CEO of Movember, we ran it like a for-profit entrepreneurial startup. The difference was the profits that we made didn't go to the owners of the organization. They went to the charitable purpose, which was men's health. So the more profitable you were, the more money we were able to invest in programs and have an impact on the issue at hand, which for Movember was men's health. So that's the fundamental difference. In a for-profit company, the profits come in, and at the end of a financial year or whatever the time frame is, the owners of the organization can decide to pay dividends to the owners of the organization. So that's the fundamental difference. And for people contemplating, starting a not-for-profit, that's a key understanding. And when you're at that moment where you're deciding, well, should I set this organization up as a not-for-profit or for-profit? I always advise people, it's like, well, what do you expect to be the primary source of your income? If that is donations from the public, then you need to set it up as a not-for-profit organization, because it becomes a public entity and you're dealing with donations. And a donation is just that. You are gifting money or products to an organization and you get nothing in return. It's a donation, and that's why it's tax deductible. So there's no benefit to you other than the feel-good factor around supporting a charitable organization. In a for-profit organization, if you decide to go down that path, your primary source of income then is by selling a product or a service. So I would buy something, and in return for that purchase, I get a good or a service that I want, and that becomes transactional. So when I'm talking with entrepreneurs that are contemplating starting a social enterprise, that's one of the first questions we get into. What's the primary source of income? And then, therefore, what is the best structure for this organization? And then individually, and from a personal point of view, when you work in a not-for-profit, that's the decision that you make, that you, in a not-for-profit, can make a salary. Those that do work in the not-for-profit industry, we still have, a normal life to live and to sustain. So, as we talked about at Movember in the first years, we volunteered our time, but it got to a point where that just wasn't sustainable. We couldn't run the organization professionally and at the level it could be run at by doing it after hours and on the weekends. It just wasn't feasible. So then you go, well, how do we fund ourselves to be able to work in the organization? And salaries, rightly in the not-for-profit segment, are benchmarked, and it's really dependent on the amount of money that an organization raises. In the US, certainly those salaries are publicly available, and that just comes with the territory and the decision you make to work in the not-for-profit industry. If you don't want that level of transparency and limitation on potential earnings, then don't work in the not-for-profit industry. Go for-profit, where you could still do good. And there's many examples of social enterprises that also enrich the founders of and the shareholders of the organization, and that can be a very, very sustainable model. So it really depends on your personal and preferences, and then the makeup of the organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it seems like it's all about yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It seems like it's all about the knowledge of the public. I think it feels like there's some unfairness, or to you're the CEO of this for-profit that's not necessarily doing anything good for the world, and you're making a salary, but you also own equity in the company, so you could potentially do an IPO, sell it, whatever, make a lot of money. And then you're in this other sector where you're dedicating your life to helping and to saving lives and to doing something that's truly impactful, creating value in the world. And people are not only saying, well, you can't profit by owning this concept that you invented, but also are kind of checking your salary and being like, are you sure, are you paying yourself too much, and asking all these questions. It feels like, for me, it would create some kind of if it does create some frustrations or some injustice in a way.
Yeah, I mean, the level of scrutiny that is applied to charities is a lot, and again, it's just it's completely understandable that people are donating to that organization. It's public money, and they want to see where it goes. But there's huge inequities all over the place, where you go, a CEO of a for-profit charity trying to change the world, he's getting criticism for a couple $100,000 salary versus a $60 million 1-year contract for a baseball player, and which is funded by the fans and the viewers and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's just the choice that you make, and they're the industry rules that apply to the segment. And if you don't want, as I said, if you don't want that level of transparency and also scrutiny, then it's potentially not the industry for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you would do it again, you would do it the same way.
Yeah, I'd do it the same way. There was certainly, as we built Movember, there are a number of things that we developed from a technology point of view that I still recall going, wow, we should white label this and spin it off as a separate company. We built a fundraising platform, the first really sophisticated multi-currency, multi-language, peer-to-peer fundraising platform. And we could have spun that off. We were running events at the time, so we built a ticketing system, because at the time there were these big conglomerate ticketing companies, but nothing for small, medium size. And there was another moment, it was like, wow, we could spin off a ticketing platform for small, medium sized events to compete with ticket tech and stuff like that. And we didn't do it. So, potentially you could spin off some of that tech. It could also benefit the foundation as well. But, the singular focus that we had on building Movember was key, fundamental to its success. I think, financially it might have been very lucrative to spin off those for-profit entities with those products, but that would dilute your focus, and maybe Movember wouldn't have ended up where it did. So hindsight's easy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about the focus. I feel it. I understand it. It makes sense. And I think that if you would have gone another route, it would have been a different journey, and we would have been a different impact too. So makes sense. I'd love to continue talking about the role of nonprofit in the world, and if you would see that, how it will evolve with time. But I don't know. I mean, I said it was one more question, and I already have three. But yeah, I don't know if you want to jump on that one. The kind of how you see nonprofits developing, and do you see them still existing in the future, and the need for them compared to social enterprises? I feel like there's a place for all for-profit, social enterprise, nonprofits, and I'm wondering if you feel the same.
Yeah, I do. I think certainly since starting Movember in 2003, 4, to now, the level of accountability
No
the
problem.
level of accountability that's expected of charities is increased, dramatically. I see that trend continuing, and you see it in even digital currencies, and the ability through blockchain to see every piece of a transaction from the time you make a donation to where that actually money goes, and how it's split up over time. So I think in time you're going to see even more demands around accountability for where money goes. That shouldn't just apply to charities, though. I think government is a non-profit entity, and we all pay tax, a large amount of tax, and yet we don't know where that money goes. So the level of scrutiny that's applied to charities should be applied to government as well, so that we understand where our X cents, whatever it is in California, it's a lot, where that actually goes and what impact that is having. But yeah, I see charities having a key role as we move forward, and in various different areas, from research to providing on the ground support in disaster recovery, to stuff like Starlight does in helping sick kids. So I think it's a network of government, not-for-profits, and then for-profits all working together.
Yeah, it seems like there are some things that are needed and useful that just don't have a sustainable business model, and where you have to rely on donations to exist.
Right. Yeah, and that becomes the charities exist through the power of storytelling, and you focus on the societal issue that you're trying to address and how you're going about changing that. You tell that story, you build trust, you build a community, and then they fund you. Mm-hmm. And it's no different really to a startup. Like, you build this vision of an organization that you're going to build. The difference there is people invest expecting a financial return at some point, whereas with a charity, people donate expecting a societal impact on whatever it is that you're doing, and people do either or both, depending on the motivation.
Yeah, the social return on investment is. Yeah, okay, I'll leave you alone now. That's so much. That's perfect. All right, that's it. Thank you so much for listening to this wonderful conversation with Adam. If you want to read more about Adam's work, you can go to adamgarone.com. That's ADAMGARONE.com. And if you want to read more about my work and follow the next episodes of The Tommy Rock Show, you can go to tommyrock.com. That's Tommy, TOMMY, rock, ROCH.com. And there you'll see the intro first episode, where I'm interviewed by 100 students and I share my own story and why I'm embarking on this podcast journey. You'll also be able to give feedback on this first episode. This is the very first one. I'm curious to hear what you think. I have a lot to learn. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for your time, for staying up until the last second. And I guess I'll see you on the next one.